Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the full moon in Aquarius occurring on August 9th, 2025. In my time zone of the central United States, it's at 2:55 a.m. So even in the Pacific time zone, it will be after midnight. I don't know about the South Pacific. I don't know about like Hawaii. It might be before, maybe it will be on the 8th, but somewhere in that vicinity. I think most people in the world it will be on the 9th, and it will be at 17 degrees of Aquarius. Now, when I looked at my ephemeris, it said 17 degrees even. Now that I look at the chart, because I brought it up as a chart, it says 16 degrees and 59 minutes 53 seconds. So they rounded it up to 17 because in the tarot, if you know about the tarot, the card numbered 17 is the star card, and that is connected to Aquarius. So, and that's the card of faith in unseen forces, and Aquarius rules the 11th house, which can be hopes and wishes. And I feel like, with the full moon bringing things to fruition, perhaps some people will see that their dreams are coming to pass, are happening. And for some people, they may actually have this placement in their 11th house, this particular full moon, and then that makes it even more so possible. So what I am seeing first and foremost with this full moon, I think it's going to be really important for relationships. And I would say, especially if you're in a relationship where things have felt kind of stagnant. But I mean, stagnant is kind of mild. Really, what I'm talking about is if you have been unsatisfied in your relationship and nothing seems to be changing, something could definitely come up here because some of these inner planets are connected to love. I mean, first of all, whenever there's a full moon, the sun is opposing it. And there is an opposition can be about relationships, about me versus someone else. And if you are a Leo or an Aquarius, so this can be, your sun sign or your ascendant. This could fit into the first and seventh houses of the self and the other, or the couple, and that could really heighten it. So if you have that placement either in your first house or your seventh house, understand that that makes it even more so. But anyone, this could be a theme for you on this day, because you have Leo itself is the sign that rules the fifth house in astrology, which in part is the house of love. It's also the house of conceiving children. So how I view that is, it's one thing to like have fun and maybe have a fling or something like that, but you have to be able to differentiate between that and a real love relationship. And of course, the seventh house deals with relationship issues. And all of these things have to be taken into account when you're bringing children into the world of, obviously, I'm saying if you're being conscious about it. So these themes can emerge. And because it's a full moon, it could be something that's a long time coming. It could be something that a catalyst that kind of brings it out up to the surface, because full moons can bring out secrets, but in addition to like secrets, it can be kind of the emotions that a person has suppressed that come out at this time because their emotions are heightened. So the other reason I say this is because Venus is in Cancer and Mars is in Libra. They're forming a square. To me, it's a rather loose square, 9-degree separation, but it is in this particular, this is astro.com, that they generated the chart and they're calling it a square. So who am I to argue with it? And Venus is actually making several hard angles. So that's another reason why I suspect that this is going to be a big relationship full moon. Because another thing to keep in mind is that when the moon is in Aquarius, it is all about emotional freedom. And even if a person wants to remain in a relationship, they may be like having enough of somebody else's like smothering, emotional smothering. And they may feel like enough is enough, and something could make them come out and really declare this. And Mars is in Libra. And that's why, that's where that square is coming from, because Cancer and Libra square off to one another. And a lot of you may know that Libra is ruled by Venus. And so it has that connection to the 7th house. It rules the 7th house of committed partnership. So there you go. But it's in Mars, which is the ruler of its opposite sign, Aries. So there's always strange bedfellows when Mars is in Libra, because it's really at odds. So if anyone out there, if you have Mars in Libra in your natal chart, please comment below if you have anything that you want to share about how that's been for you, because I can't, I don't have it, but I can just imagine that it would be a little bit difficult, because Mars can be anger, and Libra wants to avoid anger as much as possible. And so sometimes, even as a transit with Mars and Libra, there can be passive aggression. There can, in other words, everyone gets mad. Everyone gets angry at something, even if they don't show it. Even if they have a poker face, people get angry. But some people don't like to express anger in any form, because they want to seem harmonious, and they want to be nice. And they really don't understand that being nice is subjective. What is really nice, and a lot of people can sense covert hostility. So don't flatter yourself, Libra. It's going to show up either way, and you might as well just learn how to express it in a constructive way, in a way that isn't alienating to other people. Of course, there are always going to be people who are easily offended. And if you've been like saying yes to people and you just don't want to anymore, and then they get snippy about it, that's on them. Either they will get over it or they won't. If they don't get over it, then you know that they're not supportive of you, that they just are selfish and they just want their own way, and that kind of makes life easier too. So anyway, that's going on, and so it's forming a square. And when Venus and Mars form a square, there can be this inharmonious situation going on. Someone, like if this is a couple, they may be at odds with what they're looking for within the relationship. I as an individual, even though I'm an astrologer, I tend to follow in the straight and narrow and kind of regurgitate everything that I've read. But as I have, progressed, I begin to like think for myself. And I realize that this may not be what every astrologer thinks, but when I see a square between, or when I think of Venus and Mars just in general, in their influence, I think of like Venus as the romantic part of the equation. But I have heard some astrologers talk about the sensuality of Venus. And I think when I hear sensuality, I think of sexuality. And I attribute that to Mars more than Venus. I think what they mean by sensual is just like delighting in the senses and pleasure seeking. And so I prefer to look at Venus as romantic and Mars as more lustful, but not look at it in terms of, oh, lust in a bad way, but physically attracted to someone versus emotionally attracted to them. And this is true, I feel, for anyone who has this in their natal chart when they have a square between Venus and Mars, is you may find that you have a scenario in your life where you either are madly in love with someone, but you're not necessarily that turned on by them, and or you're really turned on by a person that you don't really like. And that's not good. You have to integrate that square because you do not want to get into those types of relationships, because you'll find that and I think especially for in terms of not being attracted to somebody physically that you have romantic feelings for, that kind of thing, if a person has a history of abuse, that could simply be that they're not used to being treated well, and so they just make the assumption that someone who's treating them well is not really a person that is desirable. It's kind of like a twisted way of looking at it. But once a person realizes that is um, beautiful to be treated well by someone, then that will be something that the person will find even physically attractive. Like they'll find that person physically desirable because they know that that person is a kind-hearted person, and they will not be attracted to people that are abusers. And also, but so what I think of this theme here with Venus and Cancer, if you have this in your natal chart, you may know that it's the mother hen vibe of romance, where a person is very concerned about their partner's well-being, but it can also be very clingy energy. And again, with that moon in um, Aquarius, it really clashes with that. Not the same way as a square, but it simply doesn't mesh well. So it can feel like someone that what came into my head is the person whose child is going off to college and they feel this empty nest syndrome, and you feel that with a significant other where they are asking for more freedom, and you're viewing this as a loss, or you're asking for more freedom and your partner's viewing this as they are losing something. And if that person has a tendency to be clingy in general, then they may double down. And that is just going to hasten the demise of a relationship. So if you are the guilty party, if you will, if you're the kind of person who does feel like you are pretty clingy or possessive of your partner, and maybe you don't like that you are, but you feel like you can't help yourself, please find it within yourself to experiment with letting go. There was this thing, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, that I keep seeing online, and I think it might be a book that someone wrote, or, like a pop psychologist or self-help type of person. Um, and it says just let them. And I'm assuming it means like it's like radical detachment or something, where you don't try to control a situation with another person. I haven't read the book or even an article about the book, so I don't really know. I'm just guessing. So what I would say about this full moon is just let them. Don't try. If somebody, like for instance, what would happen if on this full moon you had a partner who said, I really need to take some space. That's like a hippie new age way of saying, separate. Maybe not completely end the relationship, but they just, or even if it's a marriage, I need to take some space. I need to have a separation. What would happen if you just said, okay, that sounds good, how do you want to do this? What if you just did that? I mean, of course, if it's something completely out of the blue, you might say, oh, yeah, what's going on for you that makes you want to do this? So you get some information about why. Do they have somebody else that they have developed feelings for? Or, are they pissed off at something that you're doing that they haven't told you about? I think that is a logical thing to ask, but not to overreact, to practice that radical detachment. To be curious but not clingy. Um, so I'm not saying that this is going to cause, a lot of people to break up their relationship, but I'm just like putting it out there, because it could even be like another type of relationship. Maybe it isn't you and your significant other. Maybe it is you and a platonic friend, or you and a business partner. And that other person wants to branch out, they want to do something different, and you may just like how things have been going and you don't want to upset the apple cart. So that's just one way of looking at it. I also think that this is energy that can, like, if we look at what is happening in the world, Aquarius, I do feel that there could be something connected to uh, the internet, because Aquarius rules the 11th house, which is the house of the collective, and also the house of, it can be about technology and the masses. How do we get in touch with the masses? Through the internet, basically, these days. And even television, all these other things can be associated with that as well. And it's really, with Venus and Cancer, the values are on, our homeland. That's what we are really finding. We're seeking value, and there's like a patriotic quality to that. It doesn't matter where you live in the world, but I will say that the United States is a Cancerian country. It was born on the 4th of July. So the fact that you may have heard that the United States is experiencing its Pluto return from its inception during the American Revolution in the late 1700s, and also France is having its own return as well. France, I have never seen France's chart, but I think the French Revolution was 1792. I don't know if I'm correct about that. So it might be when Pluto is further down the line. Pluto has just entered um, Aquarius for good in this cycle, and so it's at an early degree of Aquarius. But in any case, for the United States, Jupiter is in Cancer as well. And there can be that magnification that Jupiter, but Jupiter also stands for freedom and truth. And that's an important one, is truth. And actually, there is a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. And I feel like this is good for money. You know, whenever you have like that connection between these two benefic planets that are associated with money, that's got to be good. But I mean, specifically for the United States, that could be a good omen for money at that time. And getting back to the Venus hard angles, well, Venus is conjuncting Jupiter, so in that sense, that can be good for anything connected with, if it's connected to love, where it is just a generosity of spirit. Venus is squaring off to Saturn, so that can feel very cold if the conditions are right. And it could, because I see this when I do personal readings, I do see this not that infrequently. Some of the readings I'm doing where somebody has a square between Venus and Saturn, and that can indicate that they did not feel loved growing up. And that really does affect people's perceptions and the choices that they make later on. It can make them a little bit, like excessively involved in relationships to the point where they will settle for a bad one rather than wait for a good one. And by the way, just to well, let me just finish with the Venus and I'll talk about Mars. And then there is a square between Venus and Neptune, and that's another one when I'm analyzing personal charts, is if I see this is a classic case of falling in love with the wrong person when you have a square or an opposition from Venus to Neptune, because what it can mean is that, Neptune can represent illusion. And so it's like falling in love with an illusion. And when it's an opposition, it's like projecting certain qualities onto someone that they simply do not possess. And that you're not doing it because you're completely nuts or deluded. It's because you really want those qualities, but you're working with certain things. Maybe you are attracted to a person's problems and don't even realize it. It's almost like a work in progress. Like you're attracted to the person who doesn't have their life together because you want to come along and be their savior. And that's usually not going to end well. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but anyway, so that is occurring. And then with Mars, there's an opposition with Saturn, which can mean that in somebody's natal chart, this and the square can be the father wound. Well, what is the father wound? The father wound represents the wound of the, well, you could say of the divine masculine, but it's not really divine. It's not expressing itself in that way. We have this thing called toxic masculinity. And it's not limited to males. It can be the feminine. The female can do this too if they are buying into this propaganda about becoming like men and, trying to, like, because they always said, oh, it's a man's world, so we're going to try to conquer this man's world. And how do they do that? By becoming like a man. Well, you don't necessarily want to become like a man, because if we can point out the toxic masculine traits like being competitive, being aggressive and competitive and insensitive instead of cooperative, um, ambitious for oneself, but not to the point where it's trying to conquer somebody else or to walk all over someone else, exploit, or anything like that. And by the way, this is not slamming men as a gender. This is like I said, anybody can step into this, and there is toxic femininity as well. But what I'm getting at here with Mars can be aggression, and when it's opposing Saturn, it's like might equals right, that kind of thing. And so, in other words, because Mars is in Libra, there could be people that are drawn to activism at this time because maybe there's some kind of events that are occurring that are kind of luring people into the street. But, you know, if they are feeling frustrated because they've been marching and all of this and nothing seems to be happening, and someone comes along and says, you know what, we gotta take it to the next level. You're never going to have a revolution by just sitting on your hands. You've got to fight back, and they're trying to incite violence. Then that could be like what this opposition represents. Luckily, now Mars is trining Pluto. There were long stretches of time in recent years where we had squares between Mars and Pluto, which can be ominous and indicating violence. But now we have a trine, which is very cooperative. But yeah, and then also, this is highly important as well, an opposition between Mars and Neptune. And so now we have Neptune in Aries, but it's only at 1 degree. And Mars, yeah, I mean, it's a very tight opposition. Mars is at 1 degree of Libra. I did not know that. So the point is that um, when there are hard angles between Mars and Neptune, people can be kind of in la la land, where they are thinking that they are in this revolution. I mean, you're going to have to pardon me for saying something that really, today I just happen to be, I grew up in a very liberal area, and I happen to be riding my bike through my hometown, and I saw a sign on somebody's lawn and it said resist. And, some of these houses are like 500,000, $500,000, whatever, maybe more. And they say resist. They're so radical. 700,000, 800,000, whatever they are. And you're telling me that if you really want to resist something, why don't you do it in a more economically diverse area? And it is in general, I would say it is, but I still think that it's easier to put a lawn sign than it is to really stick your neck out fully. And so this is what I'm saying about that square, or in this case the opposition, where, and again, opposition could be like what we would call what's that word, where you're projection, like you're projecting onto someone or a situation what your ideal is. Or conversely, with Mars, it can be that aggression, or that that anger that the person is projecting onto an entity, a situation, and really it's coming from inside of them. And I see this all the time, where people get fired for things they say that are really hateful things, horrible things, Um, and it's like they're acting like they're so kind. And I always see their bios, and they're always saying how, kindness matters and blah, blah, blah. And then they're saying, good riddance. I'm glad that that person died and da, da, da. And so it's, it's very much displaced anger, or actually the shadow self that is, the person cannot accept that they have these emotions inside of themselves. So they kind of use a person as a villain that they can kind of project it onto. And they don't realize that it's coming from inside of them. Um, they don't feel comfortable expressing anger in general because they really want to be a good person. They really want to be a nice person. But they can really torture people, trying to be so nice. It's better to be like an authentic person and really, take responsibility for difficult emotions than to try to act like, to virtue signal and those kinds of things. So that could definitely be happening for whatever reason. I'm assuming it's a political reason, but maybe it's some personal situation because Mars and Libra can be passive aggressive and, that kind of do gooder vibe that may have ulterior motives, that the person can't really admit to. Not necessarily like highly calculated, but still lurking beneath the surface. So, and just Leo, we're in Leo season, so the ego can come out because Leo represents the self in terms of our individuality, and how we express that individuality. Aquarius wants to be, it's funny because Libra and Aquarius are kind of similar in that vein of wanting there to be this equal footing and maybe equal treatment. And that's another thing with Mars and Libra. I think people who have Mars and Libra, or maybe um, some other kind of similar influence, may have maybe Mars in the 11th house, for instance, may have a tendency to really feel imbalanced when the world doesn't seem fair, and not realize that maybe it was never designed to be fair, or else maybe it would be heaven. And that the contrast is our teacher. And that it doesn't mean that you have to give up on, making the world a better place, but not to be tormented by the signs of injustice as if it isn't supposed to be there. Some people, they're like, well, it's meant to be, and they're complacent. And I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying that I feel like we have to see things in divine order at times when it doesn't feel like it's fair. And also, it's funny, what came into my mind just now was peace through strength. Mars and Libra, peace through strength. Where you're not a pushover. If somebody's trying to not just intimidate you, but try to kind of overpower you, get you to say yes when you mean no, that you are able to be strong and have boundaries, but you don't lose your cool, or you don't feel like you have to explain yourself, you have to do anything. You can just say no, thank you. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, I am offering a special sale price of my transit readings, which are transits for the next 12 months, or my natal chart interpretation for $49.49 US dollars. Normally my readings are $60, and this will be in effect until the night of the full moon, so August 9th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. So these are 1 hour long readings, and you can find the link below for that. I hope you have a great full moon in Aquarius. Take care. Bye.